Dr. Perry Brown, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well, sir. Thanks for coming again. I appreciate it.
No, my pleasure.
Okay, so last time you came in and we were talking a lot about residency programs, specifically pediatric residencies, having difficulty filling those. We also talked about other issues because it's not just pediatrics, right? Like you have internal medicine, you have all these kinds of things. I actually had Luke Malik on after you about a week or two. He was a great conversation. And again, focusing on what are the struggles. Here, let me sum up the conversation with Luke real fast. If you want rural Idaho doctors, one problem is that you have a large population of out-of-state retirees moving into rural areas. The out-of-state retirees have a disproportionately high retirement funding from places like California. They drive up the price of housing. They're also less inclined to vote for things like public education. And they use a whole lot of Medicare, which means the reimbursement rate for these particular patients is very low. So if you're a 35-year-old doctor who's planning on raising a family, do you want to move somewhere where housing prices are disproportionately high? They have bad public education systems because people aren't funding them, and your reimbursement is low because you're dealing with a bunch of retirees. The answer is no. You don't want to go there. Yeah. It's like, those are real problems, man.
Yeah. No, they are real challenges. And there's plenty of communities across the state that don't face that and aren't retiree communities that are also struggling for adequate healthcare resources and access to physicians. But those communities do present some unique challenges, and we need to figure out strategies around that.
Yeah. There are also communities that I'm hoping to see more of them soon, but there are communities that had industry at one point, be it timber or, minerals or something like that have dried up, so to speak. And they still exist. Like I had a gentleman by the name of Jeff Carlson on, incredible guy. He's an ed tech, highly educated, and he's got, like a doctorate from Harvard or some junk. It was like, great man, whatever. Yeah. Like that's some rarefied air. And he grew up in Council, Idaho, population like 700. Yep. And he was telling me that they do a 4th of July porcupine race. I'm like, is there like a porcupine raising industry? And apparently about a month, if you're interested in winning, about a month prior, you got to go out in the middle of the night and in the cover of darkness, like spotlight, and see if you see any eyeballs staring at you. And if you do, you got to coax the porcupine into a trash can, and then you train it for a month. And then on 4th of July, you have the porcupine race. And if you win, it's a big deal. And I'm hopefully going to be going porcupine hunting at the beginning of June with Jeff. But again, that's a community that I believe was built on like a timber mill or something. And that is gone now. Yeah. The community still exists though, right? The public schools continue to need funding. And you don't have that tax base or an employment base that can warrant the amount of money required because, like a roof in Council, Idaho costs the same for the shingles as a roof in the Treasure Valley. So yeah, again, a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Today, I have this question about medical education because we have the WWAMI program. Now, again, to be clear, we have Idaho College of Osteopathic Medicine. Is that correct?
Yep.
That's a private college to create DOs, which is distinct from a doctor of osteopathy is a distinct degree, very absolutely tons of crossover. Like if I go to a doctor's appointment and I see a DO, I'm not upset or anything, but it is distinct from an MD, right? A medical doctor degree. And we do not have an MD school here. Okay.
Kind of.
How do you mean?
Okay. So a couple of things that I want to say up front. DOs and MDs are actually trained very, very similarly. The distinction of being a DO is that they get additional education in anatomy and osteopathic manipulation. I'm coming at this, I should probably admit this up front, I'm an MD. I am not an expert in osteopathy at all. But they really do get I would guess 95% of the same training.
Got it. With the added on 5% on the DO obligation.
Yep. And there are times that I'm jealous of that training because I wish I had more of it, quite honestly. So there are just, the thing that I would say about a DO school versus an MD school, historically, they've been organized a little bit differently. Historically, they have had somewhat different opportunities within their academic curriculum. I actually, our program does not distinguish between DO or MD when we're recruiting, when we're putting our rank list together for match day, etc. Half of our residents are DOs in our pediatric residency, and some of the best physicians I've ever worked with are DOs. So there is a different route to the end going DO versus MD, slightly different. But the output and outcome is remarkably similar. And, DOs go on and become cardiothoracic surgeons, just like MDs do. DOs are psychiatrists, just like MDs are. So it's just a different way of getting to a similar opportunity.
This is a big issue, I think. I have a number of friends from college and then after that wanted to be doctors, and they ended up in either going to a DO school instead of an MD school, or even going out of the country for medical education. One gal I went to college with, I think did her schooling in like the Caribbean or something.
Yep.
And it begs the question, is like, okay, if we have people that will be able to achieve the end, like they're going to climb the same mountain and be, certified and board review, the whole thing. Like, okay, they can practice medicine. If we have people that want to get there and are capable of getting there, why is it that they're going out of the country to get training? Like, what are we? Do we need like 5 medical schools to accommodate the number of people in Idaho who have the capacity to eventually become like, certified doctors? Like, what is it that we need, and why don't we have that?
Yeah. At this point in time, for sure, we do not have, whether we call it enough seats at our current medical schools, enough positions, or we don't have enough medical schools. We also need to think about then being able to manage increased residency training, because, you open up the floodgates a little bit with more physicians in training, and you need to then be able to train them after medical school also. So the entire cascade of all of this is really important to consider.
Don't we have like dozens and dozens of residency seats going unfulfilled in Idaho right now? Like, couldn't we absorb a good number more of residents?
So that's a great question. And, a lot of this depends upon what is our ultimate goal? What is our measurable goal that we're aiming for with medical education in Idaho? Is it educating more physicians, whether they're primary care providers or specialists, to then go practice wherever? Or is our goal really around that we want to educate more physicians, whether they're primary care physicians or specialists, to remain in Idaho? And, it's pretty clear, given that we're 50th or worse in many of these measures in terms of the number of physicians per capita, that we need to really train them to remain in Idaho. If that's our goal, increasing the number of medical school seats can contribute. What we really should be aiming for, though, is aiming to increase the number of residency training seats and residency training programs, because the retention rate when you have just finished your residency, or if you go on and do subsequent training as a fellow and complete a fellowship, the retention rate of staying in that community where you last trained is actually much higher than where you had previously trained and you liked living 5 years ago.
Okay, I have a lot of questions here. So first off, we can't train people to stay somewhere, right? What we can do is provide, we can train people in a specific location, and we can provide incentivization for them to stay here. Now, that incentivization may be baked into the fact that they're here and they, find somebody that they like and they get a house and blah, blah, blah. So, and again, I think that's what you're saying, which is if you get them to do a fellowship residency program here, the retention rate is higher. But there's nothing unique about there within that residency where you're like, and this is why you're staying here, because like we're going to re-educate you on what you should be doing, right? It's like that's not the situation, correct?
No.
Okay, great. So,
and can I say something about that real
please
quickly?
do.
So when I say train to remain, I promise no brainwashing is involved. There is some mild brainwashing involved, which is people come here and they're like, oh my gosh, this is beautiful. This is a great community. There are wonderful people here. that's the kind of good brainwashing we want to do. But no, there's yes, the state could or communities could provide incentives for them to remain. What causes them to remain is I'll use an example. Let's say that someone graduates from Idaho College of Osteopathic Medicine and they want to train in rheumatology is a good example. So they might even do their internal medicine residency here in Boise or somewhere else in Idaho Falls, but there's no rheumatology fellowships here. So then they go off to do a 2 or 3 year rheumatology fellowship somewhere in another state where they live for 2 or 3 years. Maybe they meet their significant other there. Sure. They stay there. Their family's there. They've made new friends there. Exactly. So what's really, really important is that Idaho, to accomplish this goal of having more physicians of all types here in Idaho, we really need their last training program to be in Idaho.
That is a great point. I was a rower in college, and if you lost a rowing race, you had to go over to the person who beat you with your, similar seat. So if you're the stroke seat or like fifth seat or whatever it is, and you had to hand over your jersey. Yeah. And because of that, you were really only as good as your last race, because if you won your last race, then you kept your racing jersey, which, was coveted, and you got everybody else's, right? So it's like the last, anyway. So the last place wherever you are, if that's the thing that makes you, ties you most, with the highest probability to your geographic location. So then the play is like, okay, let's have, residencies, yes, but also fellowships for specific training. But we are not filling all of our fellowship and residency programs right now, right?
We generally are, actually.
I thought you told me last time there was like internal medicine with 10 people that couldn't even get.
Yes. So they end up filling through supplemental offers and subsequent things after the match generally.
So when they don't match with anyone, then they're like, all right, who else didn't match?
Yes.
And they're like,
yes, that's exactly right. There's a whole process around that. So they do eventually end up filling or coming close to filling. But honestly, most of the programs that we have here in Idaho completely fill and do reasonably well in the match. As I mentioned last time when we met, there are increasing headwinds and challenges of recruiting medical students to come to Idaho for residency or subsequently for fellowship. And should I spend a moment explaining
spend all your
this?
Moments.
Okay.
Whatever moments you want. Yeah. Go for it.
So someone who's training to become a physician, they complete 4 years of college and they apply to medical school. Assuming that they get into medical school, they spend 4 years in medical school. And as they're approaching the end of medical school, they have to choose their specialty and apply for residency. Residency, depending upon what they choose, is anywhere from 3 to 5 years. So pediatrics, internal medicine, family medicine, 3 years, general surgery, 5 years. There's some others in between. So 3 to 5 years of additional residency training. And then if they want to subspecialize further, so if a general surgeon wants to become a cardiothoracic surgeon, if a pediatrician wants to become a pediatric gastroenterologist, a GI physician, they have to go then after they finish their residency for anywhere from, depending upon the specialty, 1 to 3 years, typically 2 to 3 years of additional training in a fellowship before they're, considered fully trained, board certifiable, et cetera, in that specialty. We have in Idaho currently.
May I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Okay, so say you have a pediatric endocrinologist. So that person has to do medical school of 4 years, then let's say 3 years of pediatric residency. And then to become that endocrinologist, you have to do, on average, 2 to 3 years of additional training to become a pediatric endocrinologist. And that last bit would have been the fellowship part that allows you to be board certified as a pediatric endocrinologist. And those last 2 to 3 years are the highest probability of determining where you're going to end up geographically afterwards to practice.
Absolutely correct.
Got it.
Absolutely correct. And, one of the challenges that we also lose people to in fellowship is them deciding that they want to remain in an academic research-based environment, which means that they may end up staying at their, large university setting,
Sure.
et cetera. But a lot of it is around the community itself. So that's absolutely correct. And one of the challenges that we have in Idaho is while we have really good training programs, outstanding training programs in family medicine, internal medicine, pediatrics now, psychiatry, what we don't have is other certain subspecialties. We really do need women's health physicians. We need an OBGYN residency program. We need all kinds of fellowships, and there are some fellowship programs in family medicine. There's not a single fellowship program that currently exists in pediatrics. I'm not aware of, I could be wrong, but I'm not aware of any fellowship programs that exist in internal medicine. So they all have to scatter back outside of Idaho to get that additional training.
Okay. So coming back to all of this then, what we could do is say, all right, we need a teaching hospital in Idaho, right? We need to spend, it's like $500 million. Just what's $500 million?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's make $500 million. That's the hospital. And we then catch people, or then people are here for the 4-year original MD program. But we don't change anything about our residency options, and we don't change anything about our fellowship offerings. And therefore, we have this program and these people scatter. Now, if what we want is more people here, then that's not the best option. Now, theoretically, yeah, you're increasing the number of people across the country that are MDs, and maybe you'll get more of them coming back here, but that's not the best direct correlation. What we really need to do is increase post-medical school, the residency programs, specifically in the specialties that we're hoping for, and then fellowship programs to tack on the additional specialties. And that's what will get people to remain here.
Yes.
Okay.
I would say, for sure, we see this actually in the WWAMI program, that there are, the statistic that's often tossed out, and I might be off by a small percentage, but approximately of all the Idahoans that go to the University of Washington through the WWAMI program, it's about a 58 to 60% return rate that come back here to practice. But if you look at the WWAMI program as a whole, it actually has a net return rate of 70% or just higher than 70%, because what ends up happening sometimes is that it's actually a student from Alaska or a student from Wyoming who comes and does some of their training in Idaho and goes, whoa, this is awesome here. I want to live here. So that's because the residency programs out of the WWAMI programs have people training throughout those different states, or just training programs in general through WWAMI. So a lot of those that we capture from other states do come to training programs in Idaho. And had they not, they probably wouldn't settle down in Idaho. Others, there's probably some that just come here for a rotation or two and go, oh, I'm coming back here. There's always going to be those. But the best plan is to get them to actually put down roots here by being here for 3+ years for training. So when people talked about the relationship with WWAMI and how detrimental it would be to the supply of doctors in Idaho, because there was a discussion about whether we should terminate our relationship with WWAMI and just start sending people to University, I believe, of Utah, and we'd get, quote, more seats there. One of the problems they were saying is like, we're going to kill all of these relationships. And I was like, I don't understand. Yeah, that's a very common thing for me to say, by the way. But it sounds like what you're saying is, yeah, maybe we have more medical seats somewhere else, but without the rotations, medical clinics, trainings, residencies back in the state, people are not going to be exposed to Idaho. Potential future physicians are not going to be exposed to Idaho in the same way as the WWAMI program does. And those are the relationships that we really need to get that return rate back to Idaho. Yes. And let me say a little bit more about that, because that's a really important point. Our relationship with the University of Washington, and I should probably give, for full transparency, I'm going to give this disclaimer. I'm a clinical professor on the faculty of the University of Washington, and that's because we host WWAMI medical students in our clinics and teach them. I knew I could smell woke. I know, exactly. I knew it. Yeah. I knew it. Yep. That's not cologne. So, full disclosure. But, University of Washington has been named by a number of leading organizations as the best or one of the best medical schools in the country for primary care education. And it just is. But getting to your question, the relationships that you're talking about, University of Utah is an outstanding medical school,
Sure.
an incredibly good medical school. And their Idaho students do not do rotations in Idaho. They might take a single elective block to come up and do a rotation in Idaho, but they're doing all of their rotations in Utah. That is a really different model than the WWAMI program, where we have both Idaho medical students and non-Idaho medical students who are part of WWAMI coming through and doing many, many, many rotations, many of their clinical rotations in Idaho, sometimes spending their entire third year and fourth year in Idaho doing all of the different specialty rotations. It leads towards better understanding of our state, more exposure to our state, and, in many cases being drawn to our state.
This is making, finally, after like a dozen interviews, my thick head is like, okay, I get it now. So this is why WWAMI is so crucial to people that are trying to get more doctors in Idaho.
It is. And, the other thing that's really important is, WWAMI has been around. I actually don't know the origin date of the program itself, 50-ish years. Yeah. It has literally taken a generation or two to develop all of these clinical sites. All of the people who are bought into, regularly hosting medical students from the University of Washington, having stability in those sites, having the physicians there understand the training program and the evaluation system and so on and so forth. If another school were to try and set that up, whether it is University of Utah wanting to go to a similar model, whether it is ICOM developing that model here, it literally takes years, a half a generation to evolve that and get it, to anywhere close to what has existed for the last many years, because of the history that WWAMI has and these long-term relationships and really the network that it's evolved.
Can I ask you something about motivation for this? Because
yeah,
I've thought about, like, why would people that are, dealing with their busy lives, dealing with their individual practices or working within clinics, engage with this, right? Like, why would they help do it when it's like, I got a million things going on? The only thing that I have even close to analogous is and again, this is out there, but I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I love it. I've done it forever.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a point when a friend of mine, Mike, and I, and a couple other people started our own school. I was not in it for monetary benefit. I wanted somewhere to train and engage.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't have a lot of people. And a lot of the people that did start coming in were brand new.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember sitting down with my buddy Mike, and, this is back in like 2013, 2014. He was like, we're just going to have to train our own training partners. Like, it's going to take years, but eventually, if we do it well enough and we engage in the community and it's a place people want to come, we will have people that get very, very good, and they will challenge us and we will benefit and they'll benefit, right? So it became this thing where it did take, I remember this one guy, Jerry, who was a dear friend of mine. And he started out as a white belt, and he was a college athlete and gone into his professional life and was kind of, at the time when he started, he felt he was overweight and, ended up losing like 30 pounds, all these. And it took like 5 or 6 years. But at the end of 6 years, Jerry was an absolute monster. He was a tank, man. Like he was in his 50s and he could do the Iron Cross like at home. Yeah. Like he's one of those guys where you're like, how is this possible? Yeah. And, again, tremendous athlete, just needed train. And that's my only experience with this long-term engagement of like, we're going to build a community where that will ultimately benefit us, all of us, right? But it's going to be this long slog. And, that's all I can see. That's all that I understand. What is it for doctors when they're like, all right, look, we got to train these other doctors, and they may not even, like, I wanted a great training partner, right? Mm-hmm. So I was investing in showing people how to improve. Like, is it that the physicians that engage in this want, more help within their area, or do they just recognize it as like a duty to the medical establishment in general? Like, why are they why would they willingly take this time to teach other people?
Yeah. No, it's a great question, and a lot of the answer is actually in what you just shared. Quite honestly, there is an amazing amount of satisfaction in watching people grow in their skills and in their abilities and in their learning. And in their career. So for a lot of us, we do it to take even a further step back. All of us as physicians, to graduate from medical school, to graduate from residency, we were teachers. Every single one of us were involved in supervision and teaching. So that is ingrained in us from the beginning, because we're always looking as second and third year residents. We're teaching medical students. We're teaching the first year residents. We're supervising them. So it really is in many ways part of our training. But there's just such incredible satisfaction and delight, quite honestly, in watching medical students and residents grow. We also recognize that we need more physicians. We also recognize that some of our partners are going to retire, and we want to bring in really good, high quality physicians, and ideally, maybe even people we know who we know that they're going to be great partners, et cetera. And this is just part of the responsibility to the community that we have as physicians. And in terms of the network itself, one of the things that I don't know that I fully expected, but it's absolutely palpable and so important, is the relationships, friendships, and learning that occurs within the network itself, within, other partners, between other partner sites, and even from our learners. We're learning from them. They come to us with questions, and I'm like, I've never thought about that before. They come to me and say, hey, I was reading this article about, and I was like, oh, I didn't see that one. Let's look that up together. So it's really this awesome give and take that benefits us, benefits them, and ultimately ends up benefiting our patients in the community.
Man, that makes sense. I went through this phase when I moved here, when I didn't have, the school that I had been part of forever. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I was here now, and there was this real hole, like in my heart, for having this skill set that I had developed over, well over a decade, and not having anybody to share that with. And that's really hard, and so when you're talking about sharing things and having teaching be part of your training, that's very similar to the way, like as you hit kind of halfway to your black belt, or, mm-hmm. a little bit higher, there is always this emphasis, like, well, you need to be like, if you can't teach this to somebody, then you don't really know it. Right. And if you want to be really good at this, teach it to somebody, because you're going to learn things out of like your mistakes or little things. So there's always, with any serious student, in at least the thing I do, there has to be teaching involved. Because one, like, you drank from a well you didn't dig, right? Like, people taught you, right? So that you have a moral obligation, but you also have a self-interest, and you're going to be better if you teach more, right? That's just the way it is. So to hear that it's very similar in medicine, it's like, okay, I get it, man.
Totally similar concept.
So bottom line is, we need residencies, we need fellowships, we need to maintain relationships with medical schools that intentionally bring people in clinical rotations back through here. With WWAMI, we get a certain percent of students that are from Idaho that go to WWAMI and come back to Idaho, but we also get the benefit of having people that didn't come from Idaho that go through WWAMI that we then grab and pick up, which is great, which takes the return rate up to like the 60s or 70s.
70%.
Right? Okay. So if we sent 100 students to WWAMI, then we ultimately get 70 doctors coming back here to practice.
Correct.
That's that's one of the like highest in the nation.
It is. It's super high.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So on top of that, how do we get more residencies and fellowships if those are going to be the two things that bring the most lasting medical access to the state of Idaho? How do we get more of those? Like, can we just order them? Can we can we incentivize clinics that aren't engaging in them already? Like, what is needed for that to happen?
Yeah. There's a couple of things. So the first thing that I would want to say is I do need to compliment the state of Idaho and the state legislature for the graduate medical education funding that they do provide for each residency and fellowship spot. It is vital that that funding is there. It would be beneficial and allow for more bandwidth and growth for that funding to potentially increase some, because every residency program and fellowship program in our great state right now is operating on very thin margins. So when that's the case, growth kind of takes a backseat and sustainability is more the driver. So that would be beneficial. And I think that, adding new residency programs, having done it myself, is far harder than adding additional seats at an existing residency program. So, there could be some built-in potential incentivization around that, but the incentivization needs to not just be to the program. It needs to be actually finding more physicians in the community that are willing to lean in and help support and teach, and we use the term precept, so supervise residents. There are a lot of physicians who are involved in medical education throughout Idaho. There's a lot of physicians who are not involved in education who would be potentially interested in being involved in education if they could make it work a little bit more easily. So I think that there's ways to maybe improve processes and improve incentives to help that happen. And actually, that is something that's really needed, not just for our residencies and fellowships. That's something that's actually really needed for the Idaho College of Osteopathic Medicine too. They really, I know, at times have challenges finding local rotation sites for their medical students. And if there are ways that the state could help incentivize leaning in on that, it's just so important that the medical students get really high quality experiences too. And we always need more.
Okay. So it's easier to add instead of starting brand new. We need more people willing to participate in presumably existing residency and fellowship programs.
Yep.
What do we do for the programs that don't exist at all? Like, we don't have any OBGYN residencies, and surprise, we need a lot of OBGYNs. Like, we're really low in that category.
Yep.
Like, we just don't have those. So what can be done? And again, it sounds like that's a heavier lift. Okay, great. But it's a lift that needs to be engaged nonetheless.
Yes. Yeah. Access to women's health is something that is already a little bit of a concern, and I have increasing concerns of what that will look like over time. One strategy around that I know that the legislature and our family medicine residencies in the state are pursuing is increasing the number of OB fellowships for family medicine residents. Family medicine physicians can do an amazing job of managing pregnancies, managing some pregnancy-related complications, managing deliveries, getting trained up on C-sections, etc. That still does not cover some of the other women's health stuff that needs to be covered, such as, other significant surgeries that might occur around needing to do a hysterectomy, needing, someone who has an ovarian tumor, et cetera, et cetera. We really do need trained gynecologists that are beyond the family medicine OB fellowship route to be present for those. And, one strategy with that is to recruit more from out of state. Another is to try and train them in state and develop an OBGYN residency. Both are currently, as we talked about last time we spoke, both are kind of fraught by some of the laws that have been passed the last few years and fear of practicing in Idaho, where by trying to do the right thing that has nothing to do with a termination of a viable pregnancy, that there's there's statute out there that potentially could lead to incarceration. And there's a spirit around all of this that makes it really hard to recruit. I mean, even if we had an existing OBGYN residency in Idaho, I can absolutely assure you that it would be very, very hard to recruit people to come and train in that program. And so some of this really needs to be, how do we change the spirit and the feeling around this? It's not all about termination. We need them, we need these physicians to be present for the full gamut of women's care and to optimize women's health. And so there's a lot of work to be done around changing perception, changing approach. And I really hope that there can be an opportunity that the physician community, especially the family medicine and the OBGYN community, can really sit down and have some meaningful conversations with those elected in our state legislature from all walks and all sides to brainstorm, how do we do this in a way that is collaborative, cooperative.
That last piece, how do we have a collaborative engagement, right? Because what I keep running into whenever you talk to people about this is and by the way, you can talk to them about any doctor, right? And they will reduce it down to like pregnancy termination, right? That it's like, wait, I was talking about like an endocrinologist, or I was talking about an oncologist. I was like, we're not even talking about that. They're like, well, they're all woke. It's like, okay, hang on. Just hang with me.
Yeah.
And so like, we got to shed that idea, which is like, there are other structural problems that are coming into play. And even if you want to say the population of OBGYNs in the United States right now, that population on average doesn't look favorably at Idaho's laws. Okay, that's fine. And then what? Right? Mm-hmm. Because you can say, well, like they're bad people. Okay. And then what?
Yeah.
Right? Because do we still need them? Yes. My wife still needs an OBGYN. Like I hope to have daughter-in-laws one day. Like they will need OBGYNs. Right? Okay. Like we have to collaborate with them and square with what's going on. And I've had people criticize me for articulating this and say, okay, why should we be compromising our morals? It's like, okay, nobody has to, but you cannot force the person you need here to come here. So nobody's forcing you to compromise anything. The question is, do you need something that somebody else has, and you have to collaborate and listen to them if you are to persuade them to come and offer that service, right? And it's like, that's where we really need to get, which is, okay, do we need more OBGYNs? And if the majority of the state says, nah, we don't care, then like, okay. But if the majority of the state says, yes, we do, we need more, then the question should be, okay, well, what do the OBGYNs want, right? And if the answer is, okay, but they're all terrible people, that's not, I don't think they're going to come here by just browbeating them and telling them that they're morally, depraved or ethically devoid. Like that doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
There has to be some kind of collaboration. And in the absence of a collaboration, how will anybody voluntarily engage in work here?
No, I think that that's absolutely correct. And, one of the things that you mentioned is that I don't want to compromise my morals, that someone might say that.
Sure.
And I don't know, I'm sure that I might get some pushback on this, but as physicians, we don't try to get people to ever compromise their morals.
Right. That's always the thing. Yes. Like if you morally object to this course of action for yourself, then don't engage that course of action 100%.
The only thing and it's not a great comparison, but it's the world that I live in as a pediatrician, is around vaccines. I don't try to twist someone's arm to get them to vaccinate their child. What I do very much care about is that I be able to provide them information and to help them make the most educated decision that they can make that is their decision for their child. As physicians, we we want to help people make the right decisions for them, in my case, for their children. And, in the OBGYN situation, I don't feel like by bringing someone in who has a skill set that, by the way, if you talk to, most OBGYNs who actually do terminations, do abortions, that might be 1 or 2% of their practice, 3% of their practice, and 97% is stuff that people are like, oh my gosh, we need that. That is, stuff that we absolutely need here in Idaho. We need women to have access to that kind of, specialized care, et cetera. And
there is a world, I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there is a world where, like, I had Dr. Megan Casper in, and she's a pro-life OBGYN. She was like, I have never participated in a pregnancy termination. I have never, or an elective pregnancy termination. She's like, I didn't train them when I was in medical school. I'm not interested in them at all. However, what I am telling you right now is, and so she's like, that's fine. We don't have to have that. But we also have these other problems with the way the law is written. She's not even against the spirit of the law in her own practice,
right?
But in practice, in medical practice, she is saying, like, this has problems. For me, somebody trying to keep women alive, somebody trying to keep babies alive, we are dealing, I believe the way she said it, she was like, we are dealing with a disease process that does not care about anything. It doesn't care about politics. It doesn't care about black and white. It is not neat and clean. It is horrifying and upsetting on a daily basis. But that's a disease process that we all have to square with as human beings.
And I think that that's a great example. And I'm really glad you brought her up, because that is the exact conversation and collaboration that we need. Is if someone like her is feeling uncomfortable with where things are around this hot button topic of abortion, we're in the, I think we're in the wrong space. And what we really need to do is have someone like her and some of the other OBGYNs in the community, and again, some of the family medicine physicians, especially those who have gone on and done OB fellowship, really honestly sit down and have the way we start this, the way we always start this stuff is coming off the ledges on the extremes and sitting down in a room, ideally over some food, and talking. And trying to really listen to each other, even uncomfortably listening to each other to really hear where the other side is coming from, and then figuring out where there can be opportunities that we could move things in a forward direction that would be not as off-putting to whether it's trained OBGYNs that the state needs and is trying to recruit, or whether it is residents who want to come to Idaho otherwise and are afraid to, quite honestly, for the scope of practice that they feel like they need to provide.
Yeah, you had me at the food thing.
Yeah. I think I'm a firm believer that difficult discussions and meetings always go better over food. There's something about breaking bread together that it does help.
Are you a Game of Thrones guy? Did you ever?
I did watch it. Yes.
Okay. I read all the books.
Yeah. And I did read the books. Yes.
Books were great.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
This is really funny. Yeah. Actually, this is ridiculous. I am not proud of it, but I was a little bit cheap when I was reading these books, and I would just download a PDF of the book on my phone and read it on my phone. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying I'm a good person for doing that, but I did do it. But I stopped doing it when I got to like book 4, and there was a portion where Sansa had been taken to the Littlefinger's, like the Vale or something, after Littlefinger had taken it over. And it got really risque. I was like, whoa, this book took a turn. I was like kind of blushing reading it. I was like, geez, I did not see this coming from the author. And it was so bad that I reached out to my friend who had also read the books. I'm like, do you remember this portion with like Sansa, this beautiful character? He's like, man, I don't remember that at all. Turns out I had gotten some version of fan fiction Where
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, like it was the actual book, and then they just inserted this like really risque
so
stuff. I was
funny.
like, whoa. Anyway, but like that was the whole point of the Red Wedding, right? There's like, you have to break bread with these people that you're enemies with and there's a sentiment of assuring mutual safety, which is, look, let's eat a quesadilla.
Yeah.
Like, let's sit down and get some Chipotle. Like, can you pass the salsa?
Yeah.
Like, here we go, man. Like, we're going to hash this one out. We're not so terrible people. Like, you know, the shredded beef is not the best. Chicken's better, whatever. You know, you just move on from there.
Yeah. I think it kind of forces you to sit down and slow down a little bit. And
you can't yell when you have rice in your mouth.
Yes. and you know, I mean, I'm kind of going expansive right now, but I'm a very strong believer that we all have so unbelievably much in common, far more in common than what we don't, but we're focused on these hot button issues that divide us so much. And the more that we slow down and recognize all of the things that we have in common, we love Idaho. We care about our safety. We like that we live in a clean area. We value the outdoors. There's tons of things that we all have in common. And we get so hung up on these few, granted, important issues that we forget this and then forget the fact that we can actually communicate and talk about this and still like and respect each other afterwards.
Yeah, isn't that our existential crisis of this age?
Absolutely, yes.
Right? Like, I feel like, and again, maybe that's too grandiose of a statement, but I feel like we're in the midst of an age where we will look back and be like, oh, that was the time America's communication like broke.
Yeah.
And they had not, it's kind of like a disease, right? Like, we hadn't been inoculated to it. We hadn't trained ourselves appropriately. We hadn't developed skill sets to combat this and deal with it. Like, we know how to navigate a street, right? Because we have streets, because we've had streets our whole lives, and we know how to drive cars, and we know how to do all these things. If you go back 200 years ago, you wouldn't know how to navigate those things in the same way, right? And like, you'd make a bunch of mistakes. It's like, we're coming into the age of like, okay, like, we're going to look back and realize that was a time when people had to learn how to communicate again in these different mediums that upregulate, you know, psychopaths and sociopaths and you know, reward hyper narcissism and things of that nature. That being said, I post on social media every day. That's one of the problems. Like, one of our clips that we did that again, from our original conversation, hundreds of thousands of people saw it, and it was not, you know, to make either of us famous, but to share information. So it's like, we have this big problem with this platform, with this mechanism of communication that is at once the best thing we've ever created to communicate with people, and at the same point, completely destroying humanity. Yeah. And we haven't quite ironed it out. It's like, no. All right, we got to keep dancing with this thing.
No, absolutely. And you know what you just said, I hope we figure out a way that in hopefully soon, 5 years, 20 years, whatever it is, that we actually are looking back and saying, wow, we really got past that. I'm worried about how we actually do that. And it doesn't start to happen until we all start talking again.
Well, I'm actually optimistic, and I'll tell you why. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, if I did not have this podcast, odds of you and I meeting once, very slim. Odds of us meeting twice, impossible. And both of those situations, you're not spending hours of your time hanging out explaining this stuff to me. Yeah. And I'm optimistic towards a better end, because now, at least for the state of Idaho, you do have a place with somebody you can come and talk to, and I get to have this conversation with you. Good for me, but good for the rest of Idaho as well, for everybody who would have been in my same position, which is like, what are the odds I can get Dr. Perry Brown to come hang out and like drink coffee? 0, right? So we have, again, the problem is also the solution, which is we have to use and engage in these communication mechanisms in this manner. And that allows us access to people and perspectives to people that we would never have access to otherwise. We also have to balance that with you know, taking a hard look at where what other sources we're using to form our worldviews, right? Because there are numerous those. I was I was dealing with a bunch of election people earlier this week, and people's perspectives on elections, as we all know, were very, very negative leading into the 2024 election. Now, mind you, I always thought it was interesting that people in Idaho insisted the entire election was stolen, when it was like, but didn't Idaho, like the people that were saying it was stolen voted for Trump, and didn't Idaho overwhelmingly go for Trump? So it's like, well, are they stolen everywhere? Is every election fraudulent? Like, we still had whatever outcome you would have wanted here. And they're like, well, yeah, I suppose so. It's like, okay, so were our elections stolen then? Because if they're stolen, they weren't stolen very well.
Yeah.
Because they all obviously stole it for the other. Anyway.
Yeah.
Dr. Perry, I know I want to talk to you about medical research, but I feel like we've been going for like an hour now.
Okay. Wow.
I know. Time flew. Why don't we do this? Let's put a pin in it. I want to talk about medical research, specifically in the pediatric world. Is there anything you'd like to add here at the end of the conversation?
No. I think that, what I would really encourage is very, and I think that this needs to occur on the local level, meaning community, but also on the state level. I think it is, and this really came to a head this past legislative season. I think we really are at a little bit of a crossroads in terms of trying to figure out what our state needs in terms of a healthcare system, what our state wants in terms of a healthcare system, and then what the medical education, both contributions and output, need to do to support those. And there are things that have occurred and are occurring at a higher level around trying to plan around those things. But I think that a big piece of this is, I can't say this strongly enough, I think it's really time for people of all different sorts of beliefs and political persuasions to sit down with groups of physicians and have these conversations. It's going to be a little bit uncomfortable on all sides, but it's time that we really talk and communicate and understand what each other's fears are, what each other's wants are. It's going to be the only way we move this forward productively.
God bless it. Well, thank you for contributing that.
Yeah.
I so enjoy our conversations. Let's do it again.
Absolutely.